Lately, the word that is stirring in my field is accountability, not punishment, not moral superiority, not vengeance, but accountability. And it started in small personal places, as you can imagine, a family, negotiating tasks with a puppy. We need accountability. And in the people I work with, to participate in their own healing, working one on one with people that are not seeking rescue, but present with their own choice and responsibility in their walk. My accountability for my own journey, not blaming or waiting on destiny, not outsourcing choice to what was meant to be. Even in the books that I have read recently, an Epstein survivor, a transgender child, a brilliant scientist, yet all all still had a narrative of identity, but I was guided to look further at accountability. And then, of course, we have our larger world, the exposure of corruption and the headlines and the powerful protecting the powerful, the sense that systems reward distortion more efficiently than they reward integrity. So, after last week's podcast and the questions that still seem to be hanging around me, this has stirred something deeper. Because for a long time, I have held a very spiritual framework that said, this is an illusion. We are operating within an illusion. We are dreaming, and nothing real can be harmed. The guidebook that we followed for A Course in Miracles had a section, and it reminded us that if you dream a dream and in the dream the dog bites you, when you wake up, you are not still angry at the dog. And for a while, I got it and it comforted me. On one level, it does point to psychological freedom. You don't stay fused to the image once you see it as mind made. But there's a critical nuance that I didn't catch then that now feels like bypass. In a night dream, that dog has no agency. It was your own projection. But in this shared human world, people do. Even if reality is ultimately consciousness based, individuals still make choices within a field, and choice implies responsibility. A lot of times you will see great speakers, great spiritual teachers talking about oneness, and there is a way of holding oneness that dissolves hatred. But there is also a way of holding oneness that dissolves accountability. Those are not the same things. There are two very different teachings that get braided together. There's metaphysical non duality. This is a dream. Nothing ultimately real can be harmed. And human ethical reality. Within this lived experience, actions have impact and responsibility matters. They are not the same plane. And when they collapse into each other too soon, accountability dissolves. When it's all an illusion is used prematurely, it can collapse moral clarity. It removes consequence and it dismisses nervous system truth. I can't say that this is not real when I see real effects of abuse in nervous systems or trauma that is passed down like hair color generation to generation. If everything is just a dream, who is accountable? If perpetrators are just playing roles, do their choices matter? If harm is for growth, is it sanctified? And admittedly, I walked through many of these same questions a very different way just a couple of years ago with A Course in Miracles. My nervous system now responds to the questions in a different way. And I don't think the teaching was wrong, and I don't think my understanding at the time was wrong. I think my capacity and my awareness have shifted, and what once felt supportive is no longer load bearing. And here's another thing: when we say it's all part of a divine plan, karma will handle it, they answer to God. Sometimes what we mean is this: I don't want to feel the destabilization of injustice. As more atrocities have surfaced, I felt that. And I started looking at the support structures that previously made that feel stable. Heaven and hell become containment systems for our fear, but also the support that allows us to believe that the good are rewarded and the bad will be punished. Karma becomes cosmic bookkeeping. I hear most kids say it all the time, like karma, if something bad happens and they see it as pre-justified by something else that happened. But what happens if you loosen that? What happens if you truly consider that there is no theatrical punishment system? Maybe there is no cosmic judge balancing the scales. What if karma is reframed as simply cause and effect within consciousness? Not punishment, but pattern. And patterns do not guarantee justice. They guarantee consequence. And those are different. And maybe free will is real. When you consider all of these things, let me tell you, it is uncomfortable. And that's the discomfort I have been allowing myself to sit in. And I'm going to tell you why I find it uncomfortable. Because then justice is not guaranteed. Yikes. And I stayed with that until I realized something. I don't crave punishment. I crave moral gravity. I want to know that harm matters. That if someone abuses power, exploits children, silences victims, manipulates systems, it doesn't just evaporate. The idea that someone could cause generational harm, generational trauma, and not face visible consequence is deeply unsettling. And maybe that's why so many people cling to hell. Hell is not about fire, it's about moral order. It says monsters are contained somewhere. But what if we grow beyond needing that? It means that accountability can't be outsourced. What if it is our sovereign responsibility to claim not only our choices, but our accountability for them? What if justice requires human participation? What if we start seeing reality not as either or, but both and? At the absolute level, consciousness is unified. And at the relative level, beings make choices, power structures exist, harm impacts body, justice matters, and requires human participation. We do not have to deny the relative in the name of the absolute. We can choose to not collapse into hatred and also not to excuse harm. Non-attachment does not require moral anesthesia. Choices shape reality. And free will without consequence would be chaos. Free will with consequence does not require mystical punishment. Consequences are built into the system, but it doesn't always look like what our human eyes would deem appropriate punishment. But nervous systems register harm and societies destabilize when corruption spreads. Individuals fragment internally when they violate integrity. Power that exploits eventually erodes trust and coherence. That's consequence. Sometimes that erosion is slow. Sometimes it is hidden. Sometimes it collapses dramatically. Cause and effect do operate not as morality theater, but as systemic physics. I try to ask questions on this podcast. And if you have ever sat with me in a one on one or in small groups, you know there is nothing that I think more valuable or that I love more than a question, likely followed by another question and another question. And that is what my self inquiry looks like. So I've been asking myself all of these questions. If there is no hell, if there is no cosmic punishment, no guaranteed karmic payback, would I still choose integrity? And the answer is yes. Integrity is something we talk to my kids about all the time. Doing the right thing when no one is looking. Choosing to act morally and responsibly, not because you are trying to score your way into heaven or gain reward, not because you fear punishment or consequence or purgatory, but because of who you are. I do the right thing because I value coherence. Admittedly, I have been frustrated with this system, with the lack of reward. Distorted systems don't give you a pat on the back because you operate with integrity. Coherence is the reward. Coherence feels like sleeping without fragmentation and not splitting myself into compartments, not managing narratives and not living divided. And non-coherence is its own distortion. And it's not mystical, it's structural. Our choices matter, and coherent choices, choices that are made within your value system, matter. Especially when we shift from thinking that it is all part of a divine script, that we are just acting out this already pre scripted life, to contemplating we are writing the script. Our choices matter. That is heavier, but it is also more empowered. And here's where it circles back. I can live from inner authority, but I can also acknowledge that not everyone does. Some people do not feel remorse the way others do. Some operate from dominance, from entitlement, from numbness. Some are rewarded by systems that amplify distortion. And that means something important. Inner morality does not replace external accountability. Societies still need laws and oversight and transparency and checks and balances. Spiritual maturity is not about dissolving governance. It is about integrating both. I answer to my inner authority and I support structures that protect the vulnerable. And this is where it expands even further. Accountability is not just about our personal behavior, it is about what we build. We are now creating systems, artificial intelligence included, that shape information, that amplify narratives, that influence perception. And we can't say it's just technology, it's neutral, it's inevitable. Creation carries responsibility. If we build tools that distort truth, that manipulate emotion, or reward extremity, that's on us, not karma, not destiny, not a divine plan, us. Accountability must extend to our inventions, to the algorithms we normalize, to the systems we fund, to the data we feed. Integrity is not only personal, it is architectural. I recently listened to the audiobook of Frankenstein, and I realized something that is kind of embarrassing, but also probably really common. I always thought Frankenstein was the monster. He's not. Frankenstein is the creator. And that misunderstanding actually contains the entire warning of the story because Frankenstein isn't a horror story about a monster. It's a story about what happens when we create something powerful and refuse responsibility for it. In the story, in case you don't know it, like I didn't know it, Victor Frankenstein creates a being, and the being is not born violent. He's not evil. He is curious. He wants connection. He wants to belong. But almost immediately, Victor is horrified by what he's made and he abandons it. He doesn't teach it. He doesn't guide it. He doesn't stay in relationship. And over time, that abandonment turns into rage. The monster isn't monstrous because it was created. It becomes monstrous because it was created without stewardship. As I was listening, I kept thinking about AI, not in a sci-fi way because my brain doesn't work that way, not in a robots are taking over way, but in a human way. Right now, the dominant conversations about AI tend to swing between two extremes, either glorifying it as salvation or villainizing it as the end of humanity. And what's missing in both of those conversations is our role in shaping it. Missing accountability again. Just like in Frankenstein, we keep arguing about the monster while avoiding the mirror. AI is not inherently good or evil. It doesn't have intent. It doesn't have conscience. It reflects incentives, training, boundaries, and use. So when we talk about AI becoming harmful or adversarial, the honest question isn't what is it becoming, but what conditions are we creating? Same goes with my phone. As I'm sitting here recording this, I'm thinking about my phone, which listens better to me than my husband does. And it populates my feeds differently after listening to a in-person conversation that I have not on my phone. It creeps me out, and yet I haven't traded my convenience for privacy. I have allowed my in-person relationships to be marketed. Ugh. Ugh. I have not sat with that, so I think I'll have to circle back to it. We are accountable for our creations, for our systems, and for our use within them. And I think enough has been uncovered lately that we know that we cannot rely on unchecked systems or companies to protect us. Right relation requires stewardship and awareness and conscious participation and a willingness to course correct instead of turning away or washing our hands when things feel off track. We have to be accountable for our personal actions, for protecting others, for the systems and the creations that we invent, that we use. I used to find comfort in the idea that the light always wins. But I now find steadiness in something simpler, something that I can control. I choose coherence. Whether or not corruption collapses in my timeline, whether or not justice is cinematic and how I would prefer it, whether or not the powerful ever look shaken. I don't live morally because I fear punishment. I live morally because fragmentation feels worse. Coherence is enough. And maybe that's the evolution. Even the idea of a cosmic reward subtly suggests that if you are struggling, then you must not be aligned. And that is not true. Coherence is not a prosperity formula. There are deeply coherent people that are living with illness and financial hardship and political instability or grief or trauma. Coherence does not guarantee ease, it guarantees integration, and that's different. Living coherently means that we honor our sovereign choice. We are accountable for our choice and that those choices match our value. And the reward is abundance, but not one that is always financial or circumstantial, but abundance that is relational and internal. Peace, clarity, self respect, forms of wealth that are not transactional rewards, but are structural byproducts. The freedom this Inquisition this week has offered me is moving from if there's no punishment, is morality meaningless? To I choose morality because fragmentation feels worse than any external consequence could. It moves from God will handle it to we must build systems that handle it. A long time ago, I moved away from I will be good to avoid going to hell, but I'm settling into I will be integrated because that is who I am. And that feels free. Accountability requires something of us. Choice requires something of us. Realizing human participation is required for justice requires something from us. May that feel empowering and not heavy. I hope you do choose to sit with some of the questions I have offered, and you can grab and see what stirs in you. Perhaps some of the supports still feel needed, and I honor that. But I do wonder what is possible when we reclaim accountability and choice. What is possible when we refuse to abandon ourselves, even when systems wobble? Maybe the expanded view of accountability is this: we answer inwardly, we build outwardly, we do not collapse into despair, we do not dissolve into illusion. We stay coherent. And in this distorted age, that may be the most radical thing we can do. Thank you for listening, for letting me unpack that with you. I hope it stirred something in you. And if not, that's okay. I love you anyway, and I'll see you next week.